Sometimes one sentence can save your life and destroy the person you used to be. The crystal chandeliers above the Kensington ballroom shimmered like frozen stars, casting warm gold across marble floors worth more than Lena Hayes would make in 10 years. Soft violin music floated through the air, while Manhattan's richest families laughed behind champagne glasses and diamond smiles. Lena stood near the stage, clutching her violin case tightly, trying not to stare at the women wrapped in couture gowns that probably cost more than her apartment rent for an entire year. She wasn't supposed to be here. Not really. She was only filling in for another violinist who had gotten sick 3 hours earlier. One performance. $800. Enough to cover half of her younger brother's hospital payment this month. That was all she cared about. Keep your head down, play the music, leave quietly, she whispered to herself as she adjusted the sleeve of her simple black dress. Around her, servers rushed between tables carrying silver trays while members of the Kensington family moved through the ballroom like royalty. Everyone in New York knew the Kensington name. Billion-dollar hotels, luxury real estate, political connections, old money that could silence scandals before the newspapers even printed them. And tonight was supposed to be perfect. Adrian Kensington's wedding rehearsal dinner. Lena had heard the gossip already. The billionaire heir marrying socialite Olivia Sinclair in the society wedding of the year. Cameras outside. Reporters waiting across the street. Half the city obsessed with the event. Lena exhaled slowly and stepped backstage after finishing her final song. Her fingers ached from playing nearly 2 hours straight in 4-inch heels. She reached for a bottle of water when voices suddenly echoed from the hallway nearby. "You really think he'll never find out?" A man laughed quietly. Lena froze. Olivia Sinclair stood just beyond the half-open door, her white silk gown glowing beneath the hallway lights while a tall man in a navy tux wrapped an arm around her waist. Not Adrian. Olivia smirked and brushed her fingers against the stranger's tie. "Please," she whispered. "Adrian Kensington is too busy saving his empire to notice who I spend my nights with." Lena's stomach dropped. She immediately stepped backward, accidentally bumping her violin case against the wall with a sharp crack. Silence. Olivia turned instantly. Her blue eyes narrowed. "Who's there?" Lena's pulse exploded. I'm sorry," she stammered, stepping into view. "I was just leaving." For 1 second nobody moved. Then Olivia's expression changed completely. Calm. Cold. Dangerous. "You heard that?" she asked softly. Lena tightened her grip on the violin case. "I didn't hear anything." The lie sounded weak even to herself. Olivia slowly smiled, but it wasn't kindness. It was calculation. "That's unfortunate." 20 minutes later, the ballroom music stopped abruptly. Conversations faded into confused murmurs as 2 security guards approached Lena near the exit. "Miss Hayes," one asked firmly, "we need you to come with us." Her face drained of color. What? What?" Olivia appeared beside them, looking horrified, one hand pressed dramatically against her chest. "My grandmother's diamond necklace is missing," she announced loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. And she was the only outsider backstage. Gasps spread across the ballroom like wildfire. Lena stared at her in disbelief. "No, I didn't steal anything." "Then you won't mind if security checks your bag," Olivia replied smoothly. Hundreds of eyes turned toward Lena. Wealthy strangers whispering, judging, waiting. Her hands started shaking. This couldn't be happening. If they called the police, if this ended up online, she would lose everything. Her brother's treatment, her music scholarship, her future. One of the guards reached for her violin case. Then suddenly a deep voice cut through the silence. "Nobody touches her." The entire ballroom froze. Footsteps echoed across the marble floor as Adrian Kensington descended the grand staircase in a black tuxedo, his expression unreadable. Even the security guards stepped back immediately. Adrian's eyes locked onto Lena for one long, unbearable second before he walked directly to her side. Then, to the shock of every person in the room, he slipped one arm around her waist and said calmly, "She's my fiancée." The silence inside the ballroom felt heavier than the marble beneath Lena Hayes' heels. Nobody moved. Nobody even seemed to breathe. Crystal chandeliers glowed above hundreds of stunned faces while Adrian Kensington kept his arm firmly around her waist like he had done it 1,000 times before. Lena could feel the warmth of his hand through the thin fabric of her black dress, and somehow that terrified her even more than the accusation. Olivia Sinclair recovered first. Her painted smile returned slowly, carefully. "Adrian," she said softly, almost laughing. "What exactly is this supposed to mean?" Adrian never looked at her. His eyes stayed on Lena, calm and unreadable. "It means the woman you just humiliated is going home with me." Murmurs exploded across the ballroom. Reporters near the entrance immediately lifted their phones. Guests whispered behind champagne glasses. Lena's pulse pounded so loudly she could barely hear herself think. This was impossible. 5 minutes ago, she had been an anonymous violinist trying to survive another paycheck. Now the most powerful billionaire in New York was claiming she was his fiancée in front of half of Manhattan society. One of the security guards awkwardly stepped backward. "Mr. Kensington, we were told she might have stolen, and I am telling you she did not," Adrian interrupted coldly. "Unless someone here plans on accusing the future Mrs. Kensington of theft." The room went completely still again. Olivia's expression cracked for just 1 second, just enough for Lena to notice the panic underneath. Adrian finally turned toward Olivia slowly. "If there is a problem," he said evenly, "my legal team will happily investigate how your grandmother's necklace disappeared exactly 3 minutes after you left the west hallway." Olivia's face lost color instantly. Lena stared at him. He knew. Somehow he knew everything. Adrian removed his hand from Lena's waist only long enough to pick up her violin case from the floor. He handed it back to her carefully, almost gently. "Come with me," he said quietly. Lena should have refused. She barely knew this man, beyond magazine covers and business headlines. But every eye in the ballroom still burned against her skin, and Adrian Kensington was the only person standing between her and total humiliation. So she followed him. The cold Manhattan air hit her face the moment they stepped outside the estate. Camera flashes exploded immediately from reporters gathered near the gates. "Mr. Kensington, who is she? When did you get engaged? What about Olivia Sinclair?" Adrian ignored every question as a Blacktown car pulled forward. A driver opened the back door instantly. Lena climbed inside first, gripping her violin case tightly against her chest. Adrian entered beside her seconds later, and the door shut behind them, muting the chaos outside into silence. For several moments, neither of them spoke. The city lights slid across the tinted windows while rain tapped softly against the glass. Lena finally turned toward him, confused and breathless. "Why did you do that?" Adrian loosened his tie slightly, exhaustion flashing across his face for the first time all night. "Because Olivia Sinclair was about to destroy you." "So you pretended to be engaged to me?" she asked in disbelief. "In front of everyone?" Adrian looked out the window toward the glowing Manhattan skyline. It was the fastest way to stop them. Lena shook her head. "You do not even know me." A faint smile touched the corner of his mouth, but it vanished quickly. "Actually," he said quietly, "I know exactly who you are, Lena Hayes." Her stomach tightened instantly. "What does that mean?" Adrian reached into the inside pocket of his tuxedo and pulled out a thin folder. "Hospital bills." Her brother Noah's name printed clearly across the top page. Lena's blood ran cold. "How do you have those?" Adrian looked at her carefully now, his dark eyes softer than before. "Because tomorrow morning," he said, "I am going to offer you a deal that could change both of our lives." The rain had stopped by the time the Blacktown car rolled into downtown Manhattan, but the streets still shimmered beneath the city lights like glass. Lena Hayes stared silently out the window as skyscrapers reflected across the wet pavement. Her fingers tightened around the folder resting in her lap. Noah's hospital records, payment notices, past due warnings, things she had spent months hiding from everyone. Yet somehow Adrian Kensington had them. "How long have you been investigating me?" she finally asked quietly. Adrian sat across from her inside the dimly lit back seat, his expression unreadable beneath the soft glow from the city outside. "I was not investigating you," he replied calmly. "I noticed your name 6 months ago." Lena frowned. "That does not explain anything." Adrian looked down briefly before answering. "My foundation sponsors several music programs across New York. One of your instructors submitted your audition recording to us last winter." Lena blinked in surprise. "You heard me play?" "I did." His voice remained steady, but softer now. "You were talented enough to receive a full scholarship." Her chest tightened instantly. "Then why was I rejected?" Adrian leaned back slowly. "Because the board cut funding after my grandfather became ill." Silence settled heavily between them. Lena looked down at the folder again, emotions twisting painfully inside her. For months, she had worked double shifts, skipped meals, and performed at subway stations just to keep Noah's treatments going after losing that scholarship opportunity. And the man sitting across from her had unknowingly been connected to all of it. The car finally stopped beneath the glowing entrance of a luxury high-rise overlooking Central Park. Lena hesitated immediately. "Why are we here?" "Because reporters are outside your apartment already," Adrian said simply. "If you go home tonight, they will follow you straight to your brother." Fear flashed across her face. "No," Adrian nodded once. "Exactly." A doorman opened the car door moments later. Lena stepped out slowly, instantly overwhelmed by the towering marble lobby, golden lighting, and quiet elegance surrounding her. Everything smelled expensive. Fresh flowers, polished wood, wealth so effortless it barely needed to announce itself. Adrian guided her toward a private elevator while employees greeted him respectfully the moment he passed. Nobody questioned why a nervous violinist in a borrowed black dress was standing beside Manhattan's most famous billionaire at nearly midnight. The elevator opened directly into a penthouse, so large Lena momentarily forgot how to breathe. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the entire city glowing beneath the night sky. A grand piano sat near the fireplace. Modern art lined the walls. Somewhere in the distance, soft jazz played quietly through hidden speakers. It did not feel like a home. It felt like another world entirely. Lena slowly set her violin case down beside the couch. "I should not be here." Adrian loosened his cufflinks and looked at her carefully. "Probably not." "Then why bring me?" For the first time all night, exhaustion showed clearly in his face. "Because tomorrow morning, every newspaper in New York will print photos of us together." He walked toward the kitchen counter and poured a glass of water before continuing. "Olivia Sinclair's father controls half the media investors tied to my company merger. If I publicly cancel the wedding without a replacement explanation, the stock market opens in chaos by 9:30 tomorrow morning." Lena stared at him in disbelief. "So this is business." Adrian handed her the water gently. "It started that way." Her stomach tightened at the wording. "Started? What exactly are you asking me to do?" Adrian reached into his jacket again and placed a thin contract carefully onto the marble countertop between them. Lena looked down at the bold lettering across the top page. "Confidential engagement agreement." Her pulse immediately spiked. Adrian met her eyes calmly. "Pretend to be engaged to me for 6 weeks." Lena almost laughed from shock. "You cannot be serious." "I am completely serious." "Absolutely not." Adrian nodded as though he expected that answer. "Then Noah loses access to the experimental treatment trial at Westbridge Children's Hospital next month." Lena froze instantly. Adrian's voice softened. "I already spoke to the doctors tonight. They believe the procedure could save his heart." Tears burned behind her eyes before she could stop them. "You are using my brother to manipulate me." Adrian looked away briefly toward the city skyline. "No," he said quietly. "I am offering you the same thing I am offering myself. A chance to save someone we cannot lose." By sunrise, Lena Hayes still had not signed the contract. The untouched pages rested on the marble kitchen counter while pale morning light poured through the penthouse windows and painted Manhattan gold beneath the clouds. She had barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Noah's tired smile in his hospital bed and heard the doctor explaining how little time they had left before his condition worsened again. Across the room, Adrian Kensington stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows already dressed in a charcoal suit, reading messages on his phone while the television silently flashed headlines about his mystery fiancée. Lena watched him carefully from the dining table. It was strange seeing someone so powerful look so exhausted. "You planned all this fast," she finally said quietly. Adrian lowered the phone slightly. "I did not have a choice. You always talk like the world is ending." "Sometimes it is." The answer came so quickly it caught her off guard. Before she could respond, the elevator doors opened unexpectedly, and an older woman stepped into the penthouse carrying a garment bag and 3 shopping boxes. Silver hair, sharp posture, designer glasses. She stopped the moment she saw Lena sitting there in borrowed clothes. "Oh," the woman said carefully. "So she is real." Adrian exhaled under his breath. "Good morning to you too, Vivian." The woman ignored him completely and approached Lena instead. "Vivian Laurent." She introduced herself smoothly. "Public image consultant." "Which means for the next 6 weeks, I am responsible for making sure New York believes you belong beside him. Lena blinked. I never said yes. Vivian gave her a sympathetic look. Sweetheart, every major news network already thinks you are engaged to Adrian Kensington. At this point, saying no would probably crash the stock market before lunch. Adrian walked toward the kitchen and poured coffee without reacting. Vivian immediately opened the garment bag, revealing an elegant cream-colored dress. We do not have much time, she continued briskly. The Kensington family is hosting a private brunch in 3 hours. Half the board members will be there, including Adrian's grandfather. Adrian's expression shifted slightly at those words. Lena noticed immediately. The one in the hospital? Adrian nodded once. Walter Kensington, founder of Kensington Holdings. Vivian softened for the first time all morning. He has not been well lately. The wedding was keeping him hopeful. Lena looked down at the unsigned contract again. Everything about this situation felt impossible. Fake engagement. Billionaire family. Cameras. Wealth. Lies stacked on top of lies. None of it belonged in her life. Yet Noah's face kept appearing in her mind every time she thought about walking away. Vivian crouched slightly beside her chair and lowered her voice. Listen carefully. These people are not kind to outsiders, especially beautiful ones standing next to billionaires. Lena immediately shook her head. I am not beautiful. Vivian stared at her for one long second before smiling faintly. That right there is exactly why they will underestimate you. An hour later, Lena stood inside one of the penthouse guest bedrooms, staring at herself in the mirror. The cream-colored dress fit perfectly against her frame. Her hair had been softly curled. Minimal makeup highlighted her features without changing who she was. For the first time in years, she looked less like a struggling subway musician and more like someone who belonged in magazine covers beside Adrian Kensington. And somehow that scared her more than the scandal itself. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Adrian stepped into the doorway, immediately going quiet the moment he saw her. Neither of them spoke for several seconds. The city skyline glowed behind him while tension settled silently between them. Finally, Adrian cleared his throat. You do not have to do this. Lena looked at him in disbelief. That is funny coming from the man who handed me a contract 12 hours ago. A faint smile almost appeared on his face before disappearing again. I meant, if you walk away now, I will still make sure Noah gets the treatment. Lena's breath caught instantly. Why? Adrian looked at her. Carefully. Really carefully this time. Because unlike everyone else in my world, he said quietly, you were willing to lose everything for someone you love. Before Lena could answer, Vivian's voice echoed from downstairs. If you two are done staring at each other, Manhattan's richest family is waiting. Adrian offered Lena his hand calmly. Ready? Lena looked at his hand for one long, uncertain moment before finally placing hers into it. And somehow, standing beside him, she realized the truly dangerous part was no longer the fake engagement. It was how real this already felt. The private brunch at Kensington Estate felt less like a family gathering and more like a silent courtroom waiting for someone to fail. Lena Hayes noticed at the moment she stepped through the massive iron doors beside Adrian. Conversations paused. Eyes followed her. Crystal glasses hovered motionless in perfectly manicured hands while wealthy strangers studied her like she was a puzzle nobody wanted solved. The estate itself was breathtaking. Sunlight poured through towering windows onto polished white marble floors. Fresh roses lined the dining hall. A string quartet played softly near the fireplace while servers carried silver trays through the room with quiet precision. Everything looked beautiful. None of it felt warm. Adrian kept one hand lightly against the small of Lena's back as they entered together. The gesture should have felt fake. Instead, it only made her more aware of him. Relax, Adrian murmured quietly beside her. You look terrified. Lena forced a small smile without looking at him. That is because your family looks like they eat people for breakfast. To her surprise, Adrian almost laughed. Almost. Only on weekends. Before she could answer, an older man standing near the fireplace slowly turned toward them. The room immediately shifted. Even the conversation softened. Walter Kensington. Despite the oxygen tube resting discreetly beneath his nose, there was still something commanding about him. Silver hair. Sharp blue eyes. The kind of presence built from decades of power. He studied Lena carefully while Adrian approached him. Grandfather, Adrian said gently. This is Lena. Walter looked at their joined hands first, then at Adrian's face. So, he said slowly, the mystery woman exists after all. Lena suddenly became painfully aware of every detail about herself. Her borrowed dress, her nervous breathing, the fact that she had spent part of last week performing violin covers in a subway station for tips while standing beside a billionaire's family this morning. It is very nice to meet you, sir, she said softly. Walter continued staring at her for another long second before something unexpected happened. He smiled. Small, tired, real. Any woman capable of surprising my grandson is already interesting to me. The tension in Lena's chest loosened slightly. Across the room, however, not everyone seemed pleased. A tall woman in emerald silk watched Lena coldly from beside the champagne table. Adrian leaned closer quietly. My Aunt Catherine, he murmured. She believes emotions are a financial weakness. Comforting, Lena whispered back. Brunch began moments later beneath a chandelier larger than Lena's entire apartment. Conversations revolved around stock prices, political donors, luxury developments in Dubai, and charity galas in the Hamptons. Lena barely touched the expensive food placed in front of her. Every fork suddenly felt dangerous. Every sentence carefully measured. Then Catherine finally struck. So Lena, she asked smoothly across the table, which family does your father's company belong to? Silence fell instantly. Lena's fingers tightened beneath the tablecloth. My father passed away when I was 16, she answered quietly, and he worked at a mechanic shop in Queens. The room grew awkwardly still. Catherine smiled politely into her wine glass. How humble. Adrian's jaw tightened immediately. But before he could speak, Walter surprised everyone again. The best people usually are, he said calmly. Catherine went silent. Lena looked toward Walter in shock. He simply continued eating as though nothing unusual had happened. For the first time since entering the estate, she felt someone there actually saw her as a human being instead of a scandal. After brunch, Lena wandered briefly through the estate gardens trying to breathe again. The fountains sparkled beneath the afternoon sun, while roses climbed stone archways around her. She heard footsteps behind her moments later. Adrian. Of course. You survived, he said softly. Lena folded her arms. Barely. Adrian stepped beside her near the fountain. For a moment neither spoke. The city noise felt far away there. Almost peaceful. Thank you, Lena finally said quietly. Adrian looked at her. For what? For not letting your aunt destroy me back there. His expression softened slightly. You handled her yourself. Lena shook her head slowly. No. Your grandfather did. Adrian looked down at the fountain water thoughtfully. He likes you. That surprises you. Adrian met her eyes then. Really met them. Nothing about you is turning out the way I expected. Lena's heartbeat stumbled unexpectedly beneath his gaze. Before she could respond, a staff member hurried across the garden toward them holding a tablet nervously. Mr. Kensington, he said carefully. You need to see this immediately. Adrian took the tablet, and within seconds his entire expression changed. Cold. Sharp. Dangerous. Lena's stomach tightened instantly. What happened? Adrian slowly turned the screen toward her. A tabloid headline flashed across it in giant letters. Billionaire heir's new fiancée once performed for spare change in subway stations. The article spread across Manhattan in less than an hour. By sunset, Lena Hayes's face was everywhere. News websites, gossip blogs, social media clips replaying grainy videos of her performing violin beneath fluorescent subway lights, while strangers dropped dollar bills into an open case at her feet. Some comments mocked her. Others accused her of trapping Adrian Kensington for money. The worst part was not the headlines. It was the photos of Noah leaving the hospital with his hood pulled over his head while reporters chased behind him. Lena stared silently at the tablet inside the back seat of Adrian's town car, while the city blurred outside the rain-covered windows. Her chest hurt in a way she could not explain. Pull over, she whispered suddenly. Adrian looked up from his phone immediately. What? Pull over. The driver stopped near Riverside Park moments later. Before Adrian could say anything else, Lena stepped out into the cold evening air and walked quickly toward the empty Riverside path. Wind swept across the Hudson River, carrying the distant sounds of traffic and boat horns through the darkening skyline. Adrian followed her several seconds later. Lena. She turned toward him sharply, tears burning in her eyes for the first time since this nightmare began. This was a mistake. Adrian stayed quiet. My brother is being photographed outside a hospital because of me, she continued shakily. People think I am some desperate gold digger chasing your money. Your family hates me. The city hates me. And we have only been pretending for 2 days. Adrian stepped closer carefully. You think I do not know how ugly this world can get? Lena laughed bitterly. No, I think you are used to surviving it. That answer hit harder than she expected. Adrian looked away briefly toward the river before speaking again. When I was 19, my father told me something after my first magazine scandal. His voice had gone quieter now, colder somehow. He said rich people do not get privacy. We buy protection instead. Lena stared at him silently. Adrian gave a humorless smile. The problem is, eventually you forget what protection feels like without loneliness attached to it. Wind lifted strands of Lena's hair across her face. She suddenly realized how tired he looked again. Not physically, emotionally, like someone who had spent years pretending not to care because caring cost too much. Before she could answer, Adrian's phone vibrated sharply. He glanced at the screen, and his jaw tightened instantly. What now? Lena asked softly. Adrian slipped the phone back into his pocket. Tonight's charity gala. Lena blinked. After today? Especially after today. Absolutely not. Adrian looked at her calmly. The board wants proof this relationship is stable. Investors will be there. Media too. Lena shook her head immediately. They are going to humiliate me. Adrian stepped closer until only inches separated them. Then let them try. Something in his voice made her heartbeat stumble unexpectedly. Not arrogance. Certainty. For the first time since this arrangement started, Lena realized Adrian was not embarrassed to stand beside her. The terrifying part was that he seemed almost proud to. 2 hours later, Lena stood inside the grand ballroom of the St. Regis Hotel, wearing a midnight blue gown Vivian had rushed over personally. Crystal chandeliers glowed above hundreds of wealthy guests, while cameras flashed constantly near the entrance. The moment Lena entered beside Adrian, whispers spread instantly through the room. She heard pieces of them everywhere. That subway girl. She is not one of us. How embarrassing for Kensington. Lena kept her head down as they moved through the crowd. Every step felt heavier. Then suddenly the ballroom lights dimmed. A massive screen behind the stage flickered on. Olivia Sinclair appeared smiling elegantly beside the event host. Tonight, Olivia announced smoothly into the microphone, we celebrate hidden talent in New York City. Lena's stomach dropped instantly. The giant screen behind Olivia suddenly displayed another video of Lena playing violin underground while commuters ignored her. Laughter echoed softly around the ballroom. Olivia tilted her head sympathetically. Some people are simply better suited for subway stations than society galas. Heat rushed into Lena's face. Humiliation crashed through her so hard she could barely breathe. She turned instinctively toward the exit. But Adrian caught her hand before she could move. The entire ballroom fell silent as he slowly stepped toward the stage. Then, without breaking eye contact with Olivia, Adrian spoke into the microphone. You are right about one thing, he said calmly. Lena does belong on a stage. He turned toward the orchestra beside the ballroom. Bring her a violin. For one terrifying second, Lena Hayes could not move. The entire ballroom watched her beneath the crystal chandeliers while a violin was slowly carried toward the stage by one of the orchestra musicians. Olivia Sinclair's confident smile had faded slightly now, replaced by uncertainty. Adrian Kensington stood near the microphone with one hand resting, calmly in his pocket, his eyes fixed only on Lena. He was giving her a choice, not saving her, trusting her. Somehow that felt even more dangerous. Soft whispers spread through the crowd again. What is he doing? This is ridiculous. She is going to embarrass him. Lena's pulse thundered inside her chest as the violin was placed gently into her hands. Familiar wood, familiar weight, the one thing in her life that had never betrayed her. Adrian stepped closer quietly. You do not have to prove yourself to these people, he said softly enough for only her to hear. Then why does it feel like I do? Adrian's expression shifted slightly. Pain, regret, something deeper. Because they spent your whole life convincing you that survival makes you smaller. Lena looked down at the violin in her trembling hands. Suddenly, she remembered every subway station she had ever played in. Every stranger who ignored her music. Every dollar bill dropped into her case out of pity instead of admiration. Every night she smiled through exhaustion because Noah still needed medicine tomorrow morning. Slowly, Lena lifted the violin beneath her chin. The ballroom fell silent, completely silent. Then she played. The first note floated softly through the air like a breath breaking free after years underwater. Conversation stopped instantly. Glasses lowered. Even the reporters near the stage slowly lowered their cameras. Lena closed her eyes as the music carried through the ballroom, warm and aching and alive. She was no longer thinking about billionaires or scandals or headlines. She played for Noah, for the frightened 16-year-old girl who lost her father. For every night she performed underground while dreaming of concert halls she thought she would never enter. And somewhere in the middle of the song, the room changed. People were not staring at her clothes anymore, or her past. They were listening, truly listening. Adrian never took his eyes off her once. The music rose higher beneath the chandeliers, filling every corner of the ballroom until even Olivia looked shaken. Walter Kensington slowly stood from his chair near the front table, emotion visible in his tired eyes. When the final note faded, silence held the room for one long heartbeat before applause erupted everywhere at once. Not polite applause, real applause, loud enough to echo across the marble walls. Lena lowered the violin slowly, stunned by the standing ovation around her. Tears burned behind her eyes before she could stop them. Adrian stepped onto the stage beside her as cameras flashed wildly across the ballroom. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Adrian gently took the violin from her hands and handed it back to the orchestra musician before turning toward the crowd. "The problem with people like us," he said calmly, "is that we confuse wealth with value." The room quieted again immediately. Adrian looked directly toward Olivia now. "Tonight some of you laughed at a woman because she played music underground to keep her brother alive." His voice remained calm, but colder now. "Personally, I think that makes her stronger than anyone in this room." Olivia's face drained of color. Reporters scribbled furiously across notebooks while cameras flashed nonstop. But Lena barely noticed any of it anymore, because Adrian had not defended her out of obligation this time. He sounded angry on her behalf. Real anger, real admiration. And somehow that terrified her more than the fake engagement ever had. Hours later, after the gala finally ended, Lena stood alone on the penthouse balcony overlooking Central Park while cold wind lifted her hair softly into the night air. The city below glittered endlessly beneath Manhattan's skyline. Behind her, the balcony door slid open quietly. Adrian stepped outside carrying 2 cups of coffee. "You disappeared," he said softly. Lena accepted the cup carefully. "I needed air." Adrian leaned against the railing beside her. For several moments, neither spoke. The silence between them no longer felt awkward. It felt dangerous in a completely different way now. Finally, Lena looked toward him quietly. "Why did you really do all this?" Adrian stared out over the city lights before answering. "At first," he asked softly, "because I needed someone to help me survive my world." He turned toward her slowly then. "But tonight was the first time in years that my world actually felt worth saving." Lena's heartbeat stumbled hard against her chest. And before she could answer, Adrian's phone suddenly rang sharply in his pocket. He glanced at the screen once. Then all the warmth vanished from his face instantly. "What happened?" Lena asked quietly. Adrian looked at her carefully now, tension returning to his eyes. "My grandfather collapsed 20 minutes ago." The drive to Westbridge Medical Center felt endless. Rain hammered softly against the windows of Adrian Kensington's town car, while Manhattan blurred past in streaks of silver and red. Lena Hayes sat beside him in complete silence, still wearing the midnight blue gown from the gala while anxiety twisted tighter inside her chest with every passing block. Adrian had barely spoken since the phone call. His jaw remained tense. One hand rested against his mouth while the other gripped his phone so tightly his knuckles had turned pale. For the first time since Lena met him, he looked less like a billionaire and more like a grandson terrified of losing the last person who truly knew him. The moment they arrived at the hospital, reporters crowded outside the entrance like vultures beneath camera flashes. Security pushed them back while Adrian guided Lena quickly through the private entrance without letting go of her hand once. The hospital hallways smelled sterile and cold beneath fluorescent lights. Nurses moved quickly past them while distant monitor beeps echoed through the corridor. Everything about the place instantly reminded Lena of Noah's treatments. Fear, waiting, hope that hurt. Vivian stood outside Walter Kensington's private suite the moment they arrived. Her expression alone told Adrian something was wrong. "He is stable," she said quietly before Adrian could ask. "But the board already knows what happened tonight." Adrian closed his eyes briefly. "Of course they do." Vivian hesitated. "There is more." She handed him a tablet silently. Lena watched his face darken almost immediately. "What is it?" Adrian slowly turned the screen toward her. Hidden camera footage filled the display. The penthouse kitchen. Their contract discussion from nights earlier. Lena's blood ran cold instantly. "No," Vivian nodded grimly. "Someone leaked the engagement agreement to the press 30 minutes ago." Headlines were already exploding online. Billionaire romance revealed as fake contract. Subway violinist paid to pretend. Kensington scandal deepens. Lena felt the air leave her lungs. Walter saw this. Adrian looked away. Silence answered for him. Guilt crashed through Lena so hard, she almost staggered backward. "This is my fault." Adrian immediately shook his head. "No. Your grandfather collapsed because of this fake relationship." "No." Adrian repeated more firmly this time. "He collapsed because people in my world destroy anything human the moment they cannot control it." But Lena barely heard him anymore. The walls suddenly felt too small, too bright, too heavy. She stepped backward slowly. "I should leave." Adrian turned instantly. "Lena, the board hates me. Your family is being humiliated. The media is tearing Noah apart online." Tears filled her eyes despite how hard she fought them back. "And now your grandfather is lying in a hospital bed because of me." Adrian moved closer carefully, lowering his voice. "Look at me." She could not. If she looked at him right then, she knew she would break completely. "Lena." His voice softened again. "You did not force me to care about you." That sentence hurt worse than anything else. Because somewhere along the way, she had started caring too. Before either of them could speak again, the private suite door opened quietly. A doctor stepped outside adjusting his glasses. "Mr. Kensington," he said carefully, "your grandfather is awake. But he is asking specifically for Miss Hayes." Both Adrian and Lena froze. "Me?" Lena whispered. The doctor nodded once. "He refuses to speak to anyone else right now." Moments later, Lena stepped nervously into Walter Kensington's hospital room alone. Machines beeped softly around the bed while rain tapped gently against the dark window overlooking the city skyline. Walter looked weaker now, smaller somehow, but his blue eyes remained sharp the moment they landed on her. "Come here, child," he said quietly. Lena approached the bedside slowly. Walter studied her face for a long moment before speaking again. "You know why I liked you immediately?" Lena shook her head softly. Walter smiled faintly beneath the oxygen tube. "Because Adrian stopped looking lonely whenever you entered a room." Tears burned instantly behind Lena's eyes. Walter reached weakly toward the bedside drawer and removed a thin envelope. "There are things you deserve to know," he whispered. Lena frowned slightly. "What things?" Walter looked toward the closed hospital door carefully before lowering his voice even further. "Olivia Sinclair did not leak that contract alone." Lena's stomach tightened instantly. Walter's expression hardened beneath the hospital lights. "Someone inside my family helped her destroy you." Rain still covered Manhattan by morning, but inside Kensington Holdings headquarters, the atmosphere felt colder than the storm outside. Reporters packed the sidewalks beneath flashing cameras while giant news screens replayed the leaked contract scandal on endless repeat. Employees whispered behind glass office walls as Adrian Kensington stepped out of the elevator wearing a dark navy suit. His expression calm in the terrifying way powerful men became calm before destroying something. Lena Hayes stood beside him, clutching Walter's envelope tightly against her chest. She had barely slept after leaving the hospital. Walter's words repeated endlessly inside her mind. "Someone inside the family helped Olivia destroy you." Adrian noticed her shaking fingers the moment they entered the executive hallway. Quietly, without saying a word, he reached for her hand. Lena looked up at him in surprise. "You do not have to go in there with me," he said softly. "Yes," Lena answered quietly. "I do." For the first time since all of this started, Adrian's eyes softened completely. Not billionaire soft. Not strategic soft. Human soft. The boardroom doors opened seconds later. Instantly, every conversation inside stopped. Executives filled the massive room beneath floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan. Expensive suits. Cold expressions. Power hidden behind polished smiles. At the far end of the table sat Olivia Sinclair beside Adrian's aunt, Catherine. The moment Lena saw them together, Walter's warning suddenly made horrifying sense. Olivia smiled faintly. Catherine did not bother pretending. "Well," Catherine said smoothly, "the performers have arrived." Adrian ignored her completely and walked toward the head of the table. "Let us finish this." One executive immediately slid a folder across the table. "The board has voted unanimously," he announced carefully. "Unless you publicly end this fraudulent engagement today, Kensington Holdings will suspend your authority as acting chief executive officer." Silence settled heavily across the room. Cameras from financial news stations waited outside the glass walls beyond the hallway. Everyone was waiting for Adrian Kensington to choose power over Lena Hayes. Adrian slowly removed the engagement ring from his pocket and stared at it for one long moment. Lena's chest tightened painfully. This was it, the end of everything. Then Adrian placed the ring gently onto the table. Olivia smiled immediately, but Adrian's next words shattered the room completely. "You are right," he said calmly. "This relationship did begin as a contract." Reporters outside the glass instantly rushed closer. Catherine folded her arms triumphantly. Adrian looked directly toward the board. "But the real fraud sitting in this room is not Lena Hayes." The smile disappeared from Olivia's face instantly. Adrian turned toward the large presentation screen behind him. 3 hours ago, my legal team finished tracing the leak connected to the engagement agreement. Security footage suddenly appeared across the screen. Olivia entering Adrian's penthouse hallway with Catherine 2 nights earlier. Another clip showed Catherine accessing private legal files from the company's server. Gasps spread across the room. Olivia immediately stood. "This is ridiculous." "No," Adrian interrupted coldly. "What is ridiculous is destroying an innocent woman because you were afraid someone real entered a world built entirely on performance." Catherine's face hardened. "You are throwing away a multi-billion-dollar merger for her." Adrian finally looked toward Lena then. "Just her?" "No," he said quietly. "I am. Finally choosing something that is not for sale." The room went silent. Completely silent. Adrian removed another folder from the table and slid it forward calmly. "My resignation as chief executive officer." Shock exploded instantly across the boardroom. "Adrian, do not do this," one executive warned. But Adrian simply stepped away from the table and walked toward Lena. "My grandfather spent his whole life building this company," he said softly. "And somewhere along the way, we forgot companies are supposed to serve people, not destroy them." Lena's eyes filled with tears before she could stop them. Adrian gently took the envelope from Walter out of her hands and smiled faintly. "He already approved this before I arrived." "Approved what?" Lena whispered shakily. Adrian looked at her for one long, beautiful second beneath the cold boardroom lights. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the engagement ring again. This time there was no contract. No cameras that mattered. No fake arrangement left between them. Just truth. Adrian's voice softened completely as he held the ring carefully in his hand. 6 weeks ago, I asked you to pretend to save my world, he whispered. But you already did. Tears slipped down Lena's face. Around them, billionaires and executives watched in stunned silence as Adrian Kensington lowered himself onto one knee in the middle of the boardroom floor. "No lies this time," he said quietly. "No contracts. No bargains. Just me." He looked up at her with the kind of vulnerability money could never buy. "Lena Hayes, will you stay anyway?"